Hanson. Okay. Hi, I'm Rick Hanson, and I'm very glad that this stream is now live. And I'm here with my friends, Rachael Ebanks-Gold, who's the head of membership for the Global Compassion Coalition and a mindfulness teacher and wonderful being in her own right. Also with Fabiana Fondevila, if I've mispronounced that, please forgive me, who is a deeply creative, talented storyteller, artist, generally generative being. And we're going to be exploring the intersection of the arts broadly and creativity broadly with compassion. And the combination of those two, I think, is really touching and important. How does compassion enliven the creative process, living with passion and an open heart in life? And going the other way, how can we draw on our rich, robust, lush, delicious, even engagements with life to resource ourselves so that over the long haul, we can continue to keep our hearts open to the sorrows of the world and sustain skillful responses to them. So I'm really glad that my two buddies are going to be joining me in a moment. Yes, thank you, Alex. Plus, behind the scenes, lurking like a puppet master, Alex Wilkes in mission control, helping us be organized here. So I'm looking forward to a really rich discussion, and we'll open it up to conversation through chat with our people watching. Fabiana, I have found, is just a wealth of practical wisdom as well. So if you've got questions for her about your own creative process, about compassion, the heart, and all of our other topics here, please let us know. So, Rachael, you want to introduce Fabiana with her biography?
Please. Yes. Okay. So, hello, Fabiana. Welcome. Lovely to have you. Very much looking forward to this conversation. So I'll introduce Fabiana for everyone. So Fabiana Fondevila is a storyteller, teacher, and spiritual activist whose main passion is turning awe and inspiration into life-honoring action. She's the author of Where Wonder Lives, Practices for Cultivating the Sacred in Your Daily Life, and the founder of initiatives as diverse as Mujeres en Acción, Women in Action, which promotes resilience and autonomy in victims of gender violence, Intertwined, which is monthly gatherings for knitting colourful blankets for the homeless, and she's also co-founder of Vivir Agradecidos, which is an organisation that fosters the grateful life. So, wow, lovely to have you, Fabiana. So, lovely to have you.
Yeah, I just wanted to jump in and say thank you. I'm very excited to be here. I have followed and read Rick's work for many years, and this is a little bit surrealist for me and very, very lovely. And it's also wonderful to be talking to you, Rachael, because we've been going back and forth for a few days. So this is a great opportunity.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you. So we're going to be focused on vibrant aliveness, vitality, and we're already starting to experience some of that. What do you mean by that? And why is that important? And in some ways, could there be risks in the movement toward vibrant aliveness as an individual that might take people away from recognizing some of the challenges in our world that we need to work on?
There's definitely challenges. Once, a very long time ago, when I was beginning to study herbalism by myself, I asked, I'm sorry, this is going to tie in with what you're saying in a moment. I asked this very experienced herbalist if there was any danger or any risks in starting to study plants. And she said, there is risk in life. There is always risks. So I would start there. There's always some risks. And that is possibly part of what makes this important and exciting. If there were no risks, it probably wouldn't be something very transcendental. I could start by saying that on a personal level, I've felt a very deep engagement with life, especially through nature and some other areas that I will shortly mention. But there's a quote, as sometimes there is, that kind of got me started on the road of exploring this as a path towards engagement with political and social action, towards improving our ills and so many other things that are so urgently needed today. And that quote is not a recent one. It's one by Howard Thurman. You probably all heard. And it says, don't ask what the world needs, ask what makes you come alive and go do that. What the world needs is people who have come alive. As much as I've enjoyed his work in general, he was a very alive and vibrant man and leader and social activist. And that line is very true to his feeling and the way he was in the world. So I also think that when things get really dire, as they are right now in the world, we need to be more alive than ever. And that doesn't mean alive only in a joyful, pleasant, enjoy the sun and the music kind of way, but also in being available to whatever aliveness will make you feel and will make you open up to and become engaged with and become sometimes enraged by and sometimes ignited by, because of course the whole spectrum comes online when you do, right? When you open your heart, whatever is happening is right there for you and you can't ignore it or turn back to your same old, same old. So that's where the risk comes in. But I also feel that at this time, which is very much a all hands on deck kind of situation where I've been thinking for so many years that, you know, I like to write poetry and read poetry, and I like to read naturalistic essays, nature essays. All these people, or many of them, who have before devoted themselves to their art, are now turning towards social action and environmental action, because in so many words, in very simple terms, there will be no more nature to describe and no more beauty to sing to if we don't roll up our sleeves and get involved. So I see this turning in many people that I have followed many years, and I feel the same urge. But the way I've gone about it is by trying to find ways to harbor and ignite engagement. Because I think everybody has to be able to arrive at this from their own vantage point. We can't all get excited about the same things, but we all do get excited when we allow ourselves to feel. And that's what I try to foster in my courses with my students, and the kinds of practices I bring and the kinds of poems I read and the kinds of music we listen to. I'm always seeking, where is that inner spark for each person, and how can we just make it, how can we fan those flames in the right direction? And well, the right direction sounds a little bit judgmental, in the direction of engagement and growth. And so that's a place to begin. And there's also something else. I don't want to go too long with this answer, but there's one thing that I'll bring up right away because it's been really foundational for me. And it's another quote by another great love of mine, who was Joseph Campbell. And this is another famous quote, but to me, it was literally life-changing. You know how we always say things are life-changing when they're not? Well, this was actually life-changing about, 10 years or 15 years ago. And the phrase goes like this. He said, people think we're looking for the meaning of life. I don't think that's what we're looking for. I think we're looking for the experience of being alive, for things to resonate, for things in the outside world to resonate with our inner experience in such a way that we can experience the ecstasy of being alive. And he said this in the midst of a very famous interview with Bill Moyers. And Bill kind of pushed back on this. And he said, so you're saying that myths are about experiencing meaning, and experiencing meaning, not thinking about it. He said, no, they're about experiencing life. So anyway, he kind of pushed meaning out of the ballpark, but the way but the way in which he went about it is, he said that meaning is a construction, an intellectual construction, something that usually comes about after the fact. And in the middle of a moment of great aliveness, there's no time for meaning, because you're in it. You are the meaning. One more line, and then I'll let you respond. He said, nobody wonders about the meaning of life when they're looking at a flower or when they're falling in love. So anyway, I think that's very much at the core of what I'm trying to convey. This experience of alive, which changes moment to moment. And sometimes it's so intense and so available, and sometimes it's so muted and far away. So my search, my quest, has been how to offer many ways to ignite that spark and be in it, be in the middle of life.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think that's such an important thing, especially as I feel like we're very goal focused, and we put a lot of pressure on ourselves to do, achieve all the things and, fix our problems. And I think just that call to listen to the spark that's inside of you, and sort of trust it and go with it, and allow that to be enough. Like, you know, who cares where, you know, what the outcome is, like what, how does it feel? Does it feel good? And allowing ourselves to enjoy that. And there was once a nurse who very famously wrote a book about the like top regrets of the dying, and one of them was I think it was like, I wish I let myself be happy, and I wish I had the courage to kind of just live life on my terms. I think that really speaks to what you're saying, that spark and that sense of just experiencing the joy of life. So thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. One thing, going back to what Rick was saying at the beginning of what could turn people off or away from this outlook, is that a lot of the time we associate feeling alive or feeling vibrant with somewhat of a selfish pursuit. You know, what does it matter if you're feeling great or connected to life or the sun or your people when everything is so terribly wrong or all around us? So the way I've gone about this is I've been thinking there's a kind of a meeting point between two spheres. I'll exemplify it with a very clear, maybe obvious metaphor, but it's a useful one, which is the personal and the transpersonal. So if you look at a single tree, of course, from above ground, it's, you know, a willow or a cypress, and it's expressing its individuality, and it's going towards the sun and finding water and finding nutrients and wanting to be the best willow or cypress that it can be. But of course, if we look underground, we will see that the roots are completely connected, so much so that it's not a tree, it's a forest, it's a single body, it's an organism. And of course, it's the same for us. So what I've been exploring is that maybe the kind of aliveness, at least I'm interested in, and I'm interested in teaching and exploring and promoting, is the kind that lives in the intersection of the tree and the forest. And by that, I mean that in one direction, the personal direction, I like to call that desire, you know, following, exploring your desire, kindling that flame, despite what some religions might say about desire. I have a very positive view of desire. I think it's the motor of life, the fuel for life. And at the same time, to not lose connection with that underground web. And I like to talk about that or think of it as surrender. So it's this dual path of following your desire and surrendering to the desires and needs of others and the world and whatever is calling you. And we kind of need to hold that tension all the time, because if we go too much towards the personal and the desire, we really lose our roots, our connection to what we really are deep down. But if we go too much in the other direction and we are too outwardly focused and seeing, you know, who needs my help, what else can I give, then we lose our drive and our spark and our spunk, and we can't allow that either, because we need that. So it's that intersection that I work at. You know, how do we keep both those things going? And of course, as we get older, I'm sure, Rick, well, not that you've explored it, you are an expression of this, what I'm going to say. As we get older, we tend to find in that paradoxical way of life that both start to merge more and more, and our desires are no longer so easily distinguished from that desire to surrender to the greater whole and the greater good. It becomes one, right? It seems to be sort of a dual pull that is always happening at the same time, or very often happening at the same time. So it's not a contradiction, it's a paradox. And I think we need to inhabit that paradox as consciously as we can.
Fabiana, I appreciate that. And I'm inclined to perhaps go in a little bit of a different direction, even than the one we planned, just on this one point. And then maybe we'll swing back to the kind of main current that we laid out. But I'm very struck by what you just said there about, you know, something like in these dire times, right? And lately I've been reflecting on that as a kind of trope, a kind of narrative, a kind of tagline. I use it, others use it. And I'm starting to, number one, challenge how factually true it is. Number two, really start to inspect, interrogate its functions, and the function that framing serves to promote despair, helplessness, numbing, and disengagement, all of which are at odds with, in the opposite direction from the vibrant aliveness that's rooted, vibrant, rooted aliveness that you're talking about.
Mhm.
And I just wonder about that. I mean, a different story would be something, and this is a first draft. So
Mhm.
we're
Mhm.
creating
Course.
here. It's live. This is jazz. This is total improv. Rachael has no idea what the hell, Rick, or oops, are you doing here? A different kind of story would be we, humanity, we, one tribe, we have made incredible progress over the last 1,000 years, and especially in the last 100 years. And we've got a few big messes left to clean
Mm.
up. So let's appreciate the progress we've made and take heart in it and experience
Mhm.
solidarity and community with each other as we energize and encourage, give ourselves courage to deal with
Mhm.
the global warming and the rise of authoritarianism and
Mhm.
continuing wealth inequality and related corruption that are the few, remaining messes to clean up, the sexism, the
Mhm.
racism, et cetera,
Mhm.
et cetera. Yeah, we got some messes to clean up. Let's get at it with joy and vigor.
Mhm.
That's a very different story than the one
Mhm.
you normally bump into on MSNBC in the US or, The Guardian or other places that are consistent with my own left-leaning politics, but still.
Mhm.
Okay.
Mhm.
What do you
I
think
could,
about this one?
I couldn't agree more. I couldn't agree more. I'm sorry, maybe if I didn't express it that way, but
No, it's great
definitely have,
what you said because it's what people say.
yeah,
And I wondered
but
what
at
you
the
think
same,
about it.
I
And I'm
think
not saying anything about that to deny poverty and racism and
no,
global
of
warming and all
course.
the rest of that. But what's our framing of it?
Yeah, completely agree. And in fact, in my everyday life, when I talk about these things, when I write about these things, I'm always stressing the very truthful and realistic description that you just put out. Because a book like Humankind, which expresses the way our moral consciousness has evolved, in that sense, I'm a great optimist and a great grateful person because
Mhm.
I'm very happy to have been alive, to have been born today and not 100 years ago, because of so many things that we could go into now, but especially because of the way consciousness has evolved and continues to evolve. So many things that were just unthinkable, or rather they're unthinkable today, just the way we treat children and so many other things that have to do with a humanistic understanding and a compassionate understanding. So we've gone miles and miles above and beyond our ancestors in that respect. I think the original inclination is very old, but the way we've borne it out and it has spread so I don't want to say universally, but very widely is very much a product of our times and our efforts. So I'm very much appreciative of that. Nonetheless, the urgency is there, and I think there's no denying that there's an urgency. So how do we bring these two together? And I, for one, as I said, I'm a Campbell lover, fan, student. So I do believe in that heroic um, impulse in all of us. I don't shy away from using the word heroic because I think there's a part of humanity that really comes alive and becomes its best at emergency, during emergencies. And it's borne out by many examples in the Holocaust and in everyday disasters. In Katrina, there was just boundless, and even in the pandemic more recently, so many people doing amazing things. The look for the helpers kind of point of view. I see that, and I see that impulse, and it moves me to tears every time I see it, as I know it does for all of us. And if it moves us to tears, it's because we recognize it as our own. So I think that is our deepest nature. But the kinds of little issues that we have created do demand that we become very proactive in taking on these issues and finding, I agree with you, new narratives that are exciting and joyful and challenging in a good way. So I use the word dire because I think it is dire, but at the same time, that doesn't mean it's um, we've lost our chances. Far from it, I think, and a lot of environmental activists that I read are saying the same thing. The reason that I'm so excited about the GCC, about the Global Compassion Coalition, is because I so much agree with you that we need to bring together all these different groups. There's so many and working in so many directions, and we all feel like we're a drop in the ocean, but at the same time, we are the ocean, and we just need to connect and create a bigger story that includes us and where everybody is pitching in from their own specific talents and inclinations. But we do need to have sort of a focus in mind, which is, well, it's not just one, because you mentioned several and they're all important, but I can't help but think that the environmental one is the most what's the one? The clarion call. As I don't know.
Yeah, it's the one. It's the most existential threat.
Yeah, because everything else will just not be around even to fight against if we don't tackle this one. So I personally am now involved in creating a little environmental project here, which has to do with creating mini forests. They're called pocket forests. It's not my own creation. Have you heard of? Okay, from this Japanese designer, and it's just one. It's a beautiful way of just planting very densely planted forests of native trees that create, sequester carbon and creates habitat for wildlife in the middle of cities. Just in 2 words, that's what. So those kinds of initiatives, if we were to gather around them enough people,
100%.
Of course, and as you know, this is everybody wants to plant trees. It's beautiful to plant trees and to have them around you. So it's not a gloomy perspective. It's it's an active one. It's an act of hope. Yeah.
More on that in a minute, but I'm going to let Rachael get a word in edgewise, if not more than a few words appropriately. Rachael.
Thank you, Rick. Well, a couple of things are coming up. So one, I was just wondering, because obviously I feel like in any sort of change, whether it's internal or external, something that's fundamental is awareness. So I was just wondering, is there any kind of obvious sort of things that we need to be aware of that maybe we're not aware of in order for us to really step into this sense of true vibrant aliveness that it includes us allowing ourselves to shine, but also recognizing that we are part of the whole, and in that meeting of those two things being activated enough to kind of take action. So is there any sort of obvious blocks that we need to be aware of?
Well, one that comes to mind, I briefly mentioned it before, is undoing this myth in a bad way. I'm a lover of myths, but a non-truth or an exaggeration, where we tend to think that pursuing your passions or doing something that makes you feel alive and connected is an act of selfishness. If I were to say, if dancing brings you alive, but please go dance. For all that is holy, go dance, because that is going to give you the energy you need to find what causes around you need that energy from you. And maybe you want to do, dancing street protests like many are doing, or maybe you want to teach dancing to underprivileged people who need that spark. So what I think is, if we can get across the idea that these two things are perfectly compatible, and in fact they are mutually beneficial, that feeding your own passion and desire can be a very great way to engage with the world and bring that gift, and not the other way around. It's not detaching, it's engaging, it's immersing yourself in the world. I think that's one key concept that I would love to promote. I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, definitely. Giving ourselves permission to say yes, because actually this is part of something bigger. It has the potential to be, whereas perhaps if we're kind of saying no to ourselves all the time, we don't get that opportunity to plant the seed that may grow into something that goes way beyond us.
Exactly. And just one thing that I want to add is, also you said to let ourselves shine. That's one of I created a year-long course last year, the year that's coming to an end, with 10 keys to aliveness. And one was, I called it Be the Sun. And by that I meant allow yourself not to shine in an egotistical way, but to embrace the expansive emotions and the elated emotions, such as joy and enthusiasm, because we tend to think those are at the other end of the spectrum of activism. I think they should be right in the middle of our activism today. I think we need joyful activism, we need vibrant activism, we need playful activism. No incompatibilities there. I think it's much more effective, in fact, than the kind of angry, fearful activism that has. I'm not saying it's the only activism we've had, of course, but there is a predominance of those kinds of emotions, or at least we all think of that when we, imagine protest marches, which are very necessary. Of course, this is not one to the exclusion of the other, but it's not the only way to create change and to create engagement, with the world.
Love that. So Fabiana, are there any other attitudes or qualities that we can cultivate to fully step into this aliveness?
Yes, definitely. Well, let's see if I can sort of narrow it down because, as I said, those 10 keys are all vital to me. But if I had to pick out two, I actually can't pick out one. I'll pick two. One is, and of course, that's why I wrote a whole book about it. One is wonder and awe, which to me is it's my most beloved and familiar emotion. And just for those that may not have explored this, wonder and awe, which are very similar, but let's group them together for now, have to do with these moments of feeling directly in contact with mystery, with the mystery that life is. So we could think of it as, I think Dr. Keltner defines it as something being in the presence of something very vast, and at the same time vast and incomprehensible, or at least it makes you think again and try to understand, even though you never will, but comprehend whatever is you're viewing, whether it's a starry sky in the night or a piece of music or any of those very moving things that are really available all the time. You know, you only need to look at the sky. You don't really need to go far or go up a mountain to find that awe. But awe, we know now, is a very contagious and learnable emotion. So some people are very awe prone and some people are less prone, but I can say with some confidence, because I've taught this for so long, that everybody catches it. Everybody, it's a wonderful disease. It's a wonderful vibrancy that is not far for anyone. In fact, we all practiced it every day as children, so it's never very far away. And the other key is love. And I know that it's very trite, but some people don't talk about love in certain circles because it seems, I remember I interviewed when I was a journalist many years ago, Cindy Wigglesworth. Have you heard of her? She has a book on spiritual intelligence, and it's a wonderful book. And she created this concept. She described spiritual intelligence, I hope I can quote her correctly, as being able to live or to be with compassion and wisdom, inner and outer, compassion and wisdom, no matter what is happening on the outside. And I remember asking her, so wouldn't wisdom and compassion be love? Aren't those like the two wings of love? And she said, yes, but don't tell anyone because I can't use the word love.
Don't say that word.
Because she worked in the corporate. I think she worked in Exxon when she began her explorations and her research. So she could not bring that to a boardroom. She couldn't say, we need to be more loving. So she would talk about spiritual intelligence, which sounded very serious. And she was really talking about love. So I will just start there. Activating love. And I think it's such a powerful force. And it's so misunderstood because we use it every day in so many different ways. And we don't even know what we're talking about anymore. But we do know it when we feel it. So I teach many practices that have to do with activating a very embodied and honest, and at the same time, pretty universal kind of love.
That could be a kind of segue to this topic, which, to my knowledge, Rachael, we have not yet ever explored in any of our, at this point, probably close to 20 at least, conversations through the Global Compassion Coalition. And that's the topic of the transpersonal. The mystery, the ground, the divine, that may be true. We don't need to assert it while exploring its possibility. And that said, you speak, Fabiana, of two spheres, domains, or something or others of vitality. We could include perhaps love in that, the personal and the transpersonal. Can you speak about how you experience their intersection and what you think might be useful, I think, signposts, fingers pointing at the one moon in terms of orienting in that space?
Of course, that's a beautiful question. Yeah, I speak of it in very grounded terms, so it might sound personal when I'm talking about the transpersonal, but that's how I experience it. And the reason that I broach it theoretically, I mean, in my life, I'll tell you about more of a personal experience of it. But the reason I approach it is because when I set out to explore vitality, the same as I did with wonder, I realized that you can't just talk about aliveness or vitality without describing what you're talking about. Because of course, as such, it's a neutral term. A murderer could feel alive as they're going about their horrible deeds. So you have to explain what you mean by, it's not any kind of vitality, right? So there's a vitality of the body, which is when your whole body is engaged in whatever you're doing, and that's a very, very important part of it. But the other part is your heart. Your heart, where is it at? What is it? What's going on there? How inclusive is it being? Is it just about you, or is there another person, a tree, a bird, your surroundings, whatever it is that you're experiencing as part of that moment? How aware of you? How aware of it are you? How much are you letting it in? Its needs, its desires, its agency, its dignity. So that's one part, right? That I wanted to make clear, that I'm not talking about any kind of aliveness, but the kind of aliveness that is not uniquely, exclusively personal. Because the personal without the transpersonal really loses any kind of meaning to me. I'm going to use the word meaning now. It becomes kind of, it can go in a direction that is no longer anywhere near what I'm interested in promoting. So the transpersonal for me, not coming from a religious background at all, in fact, coming from a very, I would almost say, militantly atheistic background. My mother was a psychoanalyst, and my father was a businessman, and they were lovely people, but they were not at all spiritual people, and not, at least not in traditional terms. And it was kind of frowned upon. So this is not something that I grew up with, but I did need it and find it, or it found me. So I would say that I found the transpersonal, first of all, in nature, clearly, in birds and in trees, and just the feeling that I get whenever I'm anywhere with any kind of natural life, which is almost everywhere. And very quickly I began to understand that there is no dividing. At first I called it nature, then I realized that nature is us, and it's the people around you, and it's the emotions that we share, and it's the music that we create, and the paintings and the poems and everything. So I can't really say the transpersonal is some other place, and I certainly don't go to a specific place to find it, church or otherwise. I find it everywhere, but it's a way of looking, and it's a way of connecting that has everything to do with the heart. And the heart is a metaphor, of course, but it's at the same time to me, it's a very grounded and honest metaphor, because that's really where I feel things. And I know that there's a long tradition of us, touching our hearts when we are moved by either beauty or sadness. And there's a lot of research, very interesting research also. I don't want to go in that direction about what the heart senses and intuits and its intelligence. So I like to use the heart as the place that we can ground all this. My meditations are always heart meditations, and they have to do with the way that heart wisdom and width and expansion really cannot exclude anyone. It just can't. It's not in its nature. So that's the transpersonal for me, the place where you cannot exclude anyone, no matter what they've done, what they are, how difficult they are for you personally. Doesn't mean, of course, as you know very well, that we have to be, saints or befriend everyone, but there's a place where you really just cannot push them out of your heart or wish them ill if you're being true to yourself, if you're being true to your nature. Yeah.
I want to name a distinction that in the spirit of being inclusive here, in that, to me, what you've spoken to so far, when you say transpersonal, is the softening of and blurring of the edges between the individual person, the Fabiana mind-body process unfolding, that particular wave in the ocean of reality. And you're speaking of, when you say transpersonal, recognition of the whole ocean of reality. And so far, so good. The trees, the birds, nature draws us into the sense of that, the starry sky. So far, that is entirely still within the natural, materialist, potentially atheistic frame. And there are many, me included, who have a sense of that, of what is beyond that frame. And that's kind of, and some people, me included, might reserve the term spiritual, the divine, the ground, the ultimate, the absolute, God. Dare I say the word that starts with a G there, or that. And I just want to acknowledge that move, that distinction that is very alive for many people who would, in fact, say that their livingness, their vitality, in a deep sense, is informed, grounded in the ultimate basis of their livingness is that which is transcendental.
Yes.
Alongside all the, transpersonal sense of
Mhm.
oneness that's
Mhm.
very available to us, particularly in our connection with the living world. So I
Yeah.
wonder what
I,
you made of that.
yeah, it's a good point. That's a good distinction. Thank you for that. I see it, and at the same time, I don't experience it as something different. I'm sorry to go back to my
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going back. I'm just maybe trying to clarify that when I talk about the birds of the trees, I'm not talking about the birds and the trees themselves, or the sky, or even the person I love most in the world, the people I love most in the world. I'm talking about what shines through them. And that mystery, and really I use no other term because sometimes I call it love, but I'm more comfortable with mystery because it encompasses so much more in a way. I feel that love is kind of that sweet spot in the midst, in the middle of mystery. There was another beautiful line by, I don't know if beautiful, there's another very striking line by Joseph Campbell that really um, made me a lifelong fan because I like spiritual outlooks that don't leave out the darkness, that really tell the whole story, the whole picture. And he said something like, life is this marvelous and monstrous mystery, at times marvelous, at times monstrous, but there is a sweetness in the middle of it, in the midst of this. And I think this is not something he said. What I interpret is that sweetness, which I also feel, is love, is very much love. It's what makes everything make sense. It's what makes us continue to strive no matter what happens. Vitality and love are also very intertwined. So um, when I talk about being in the presence of mystery, I always see mystery. In fact, there's a you probably have heard this line from The Little Prince, which says that the essential is invisible to the eyes. And I've always had a quarrel with this because to me it's so visible. It is so very visible. The invisible is so very visible. And what I mean by that is that it's what shines through reality. It's what shines through and astounds you. And a lot of the time it's coming from us. The kinds of things we see humans do are transpersonal and transcendent because you can't understand a woman forgiving the murderer of her son. And even there's a beautiful story. I won't go into it, but there's one that Jack Cornfield, probably your friend, tells. I can't remember who told it to him, but he tells it beautifully. This woman whose son was murdered, and then she went to the trial and she sort of threatened the young boy, but I won't tell the whole story. But at the end, she ends up visiting him, getting to know him, and realizing that this boy has not known love his entire life. And so the story ends by her telling him, I told you that I would kill you because I couldn't bear the thought that somebody that would kill my son in cold blood would continue to exist in this world. And this boy no longer exists in this world. Now you are, I don't remember his name, and I want you to live with me. I want to adopt you. Anyway, so such a feat, such a moral feat, such a feat of the heart is not explainable in everyday, ordinary, atheistic terms, if you will. I mean, science will never be able to explain such an act. It's completely counterintuitive. It makes no sense unless you take into account that something deep in us knows we are all one. So that is, to me, the very essence of transcendence. We don't need to name a source to know that there is one, and we'll never know what it is, but the way it emanates is so striking and so moving that we can live our whole lives in service of it.
I would challenge that we can never know it. I think that's a common throwaway line, but many of us do know it. I think you are embodying the knowing of it in your own life yourself.
Thank you. But you know what I mean is that we can't describe it, and I personally
Okay.
don't use the term God, and I say very little about what that's about because from a intellectual point of view, mystery will remain mystery, but it can be understood with the head, but it can definitely be embraced and lived out with our hearts. So it's just a different way of understanding. Yes, I get what you're saying. I think
Yeah.
it's palpable, but it's maybe not explainable.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, very good. Well, Rachael, we've got some questions, right? From
We do.
People watching. Great.
Yeah. So here is the first question. Here in Kenya, Nairobi challenges us to start something like compassion and build in families and communities unrealistic expectations from people. They expect some help or job offer. How do we deal with that?
That's a good one. Yes, that's a very good one. I think we can't ignore those cries for help. I think both have to come together. And that's what I strive to do in the initiatives that we create here. Of course, there's only so much an individual can do. But when we gather together, there's a lot more we can do. So let me just give you a very small example of a movement that I did not create. I only joined, and I've been doing very joyfully for some months. We have a lot of poverty in Argentina. It's something like over 40% of the population is poor. So we have a lot of suffering. And there's many groups that gather together to help out. And one gathers every Monday evening in the central square in Buenos Aires, a very, iconic square where the government building is and the cathedral and everything. And we cook and we bring people together and we talk and we exchange. And a lot of needs come up there, very specific needs. This girl needs a backpack. This man needs help with his health. And as we're feeding and we're trying to share our love, we're also trying to take care of those other needs. You really can't do one without the other. I'm sorry I can't be more helpful with my response, but I absolutely agree with you that the physical and survival needs come first, and everything else sort of comes with it.
If I could kind of build on that question,
Please.
in this frame of vitality as our topic, very often you think of vitality as energy, intensity, aliveness, passion, and that vitality and aliveness and passion can be mobilized for different kinds of reasons and be expressed in different kinds of ways, right?
Yes.
And one way that it sometimes comes at us in the vitality of others is like a joyful invitation to dance with them in some way. That's easy.
Yeah.
That's easy. What if the intensity, their lived vitality is coming at us with an intense request or demand, or even further, a strong complaint, a blame of us? They're being vital. They're being alive. How do we? What's your orientation? What's the Aikido of that?
That's a wonderful invitation, and a beautiful question. I'm going to answer with something I saw yesterday at the square as we were feeding people. It was our sort of a festive Christmas kind of occasion, and we were so happy. There were so many presents we had prepared and food. And there's one woman who's very cranky, almost, to the point of being aggressive, really, and very much a complainer. And I didn't personally know her. I hadn't come across her. So I got a little bit struck by her saying she didn't want to wait in line. She wanted to eat first. Anyway, she was just being really aggressive with the people, all of us who were serving, and saying, I don't understand. Why are you even doing this? And I saw one of the men who've been going to this for a long time. And he said, oh, Susan is her name. Susan, always being cranky. What's the matter now? What kind of a day have you had? He just didn't engage with her anger, but he didn't get angry at her either. I found that so beautiful, because my first reaction was to be taken aback that,
Right.
she was sort of rejecting the gift or being confrontational. But I think we won't be able to ease other people's pains so quickly that we'll be able to overcome their anger. But of course, we can know that their anger most likely has its good reasons, its good causes, even if we didn't create them. And we can be compassionate in the face of that. So again, not asking anybody to be saintly, but yes, to continue to stay in that heart space and to say, okay, there's a beautiful question by Cindy Wigglesworth that I mentioned that I like to bring. And she says, a good question is, what would have happened to me? What would I have to have gone through in my life in order for me to be acting that way or saying that? And of course, once you ask that question, so many things come to mind that probably did happen. So it's very hard to stay angry after that.
Beautiful. Thank you.
Not at all.
So thank you for that, Fabiana. Actually, it reminded me of an interaction I had with the taxi driver the other day. I got into the taxi, he was very grumpy, and I kind of was like, oh God, here we go. And then I just said, like, how are you? And we ended up having a really beautiful, like, enlivening conversation that actually like lifted me up. And, if I'd have just maybe not said anything to him, we would have both probably been grumpy, but actually just that moment of human interaction allowed us to both kind of, live in the
beautiful.
moment and feel better.
That was beautiful and brave of you. It's not always easy to do that. That's lovely.
Oh, thank you. All right, so we've got a question from Pablo. He says, what is your advice to help someone to find his or her inner significant desires that may allow them to experience life as you describe?
Wow, that's a good one. I don't know if I'll be able to say a whole lot about it, but I would recommend, because I teach this through year-long courses, so it's not simple as one little practice, but I do think that there's more clarity to be found in action. So I would say, rather than think about it, rather than stay home and sort of go through the options and say and discard a lot of them as one does, is just get out there, do anything. It's so much easier to get excited about something once you're in it, and especially, as Rick said earlier, as you catch it from other people. And a lot of this has to do with human interaction, with just being with other people, especially after the pandemic. We are, I hope, all so clear about the importance of this. I have international students, and everything happened in the last 2 days because it's been very festive days. We had a gathering, and even a student from Mexico came down, and just hugging each other after years of working together and not being together. It was just the most moving thing you can imagine. And that's like a locomotive type of vitality that you feel. So finding that vibrancy in each other is a wonderful way to go about it. And for that to happen, you have to get out and take classes, offer what you know. That's another really good one. Offer any talents or skills you have. And also, even this, if you find yourself lonely, then go find somebody that feels lonely and help them with that. Be with them. If you are unmotivated, find other people that are unmotivated and see what you can bring to their perspective. There's a lot of riches to be found in being proactive about this. I hope that helps.
Yeah, I'd love to
Very
build on
nice.
that just briefly.
Please.
I think, and I bet what I'm about to say you would say yourself if you had more time. One is that the fundamental desire to be for yourself, to treat yourself like you matter. That's a desire. That's an intention. That's a value. That's an aim. And it can be very much a bottom-up kind of commitment that you treat your own life like it matters. That is foundational. And without that, obviously, how could a person get energized in any way to help themselves? That's the pilot light. And I find that pilot light is out probably for about half the people I know. They have it for others. They're loyal to others, but they're not loyal to themselves in a heartfelt way that has traction. So that would be one desire I would suggest, I would nominate for identifying and encouraging. A second one is the desire to have a life of richness and texture and depth, rather than the robotic ways that many people walk through life, as Gurdjieff put it, sleepwalking. To make that commitment in the face of a world that tends to want to, particularly capitalism, wants to draw people in. I think you used the word commodification in some of the notes that you sent us early on. Wants to turn us into commodities that consume and excrete and then consume some more, and that's about it. And to say, heck no, I want a different kind of life, and that matters. And I'm going to walk through the scripts of others that to the extent I need to make some money or fulfill my duties, but fundamentally, I'm going to use those systems for me and not let those systems use me for them. That's fundamental. And then on the basis of those two primary desires, then the rest becomes kind of important detail.
Thank you for that. That's so lovely. I'm so glad you added that. It's crucial. And just to add to that, I was just, as you talked about a psychological, or actually talked about a textured, rich life. And there's some research I came across recently, which I found very exciting and very aligned with the idea of vitality that I'm trying to explore. It's by a professor called Oishi in Virginia. I don't know if you've seen it. I don't think it's gone around much. What he does is he posits there's like two kinds of good lives that the idea of the good life has two great tangents. So one is the comfortable life, the hedonic life, right? So there's values there that have to do with contentment and comfort and free time and those kinds of things, which are great to be had when you can. And then there's the eudaimonic, in the Aristotelian sense, that the meaningful life. So the meaningful life is more about service and morality and thinking of others, and that's another beautiful kind of life. But then he posits a third kind of course, these are all enmeshed. It's not like you can pick them apart, but it's just bringing into view a third possibility. And he calls this a psychologically rich life. And this one will be one that is marked by change and growth and change of perspectives and being exposed to different kinds of stimulus. So a lot of people, when I discuss this with my students, a lot of them felt relieved because they felt called to travel and to talk to different people. And they didn't know if this was being a service oriented person or if it was meaningful or not, but they just feel alive when they're out meeting, different kinds of experiences, things that challenge their mentality, their thinking. So I would like to add to the question, I think, what was it, Pablo, who asked, that another great way, as Rick was saying, is to allow yourself a variety of different experiences and just seeing how you react to them, because that's a way to get to know yourself, putting yourself in weird situations and going to places you're a little bit uncomfortable going, or not whatever that is not too uncomfortable, because of course I agree you have to be mindful of your own self-care, but something that might be just a little bit odd and unusual might create new vistas, and there's a lot of vitality to be had there.
What came up for me just then is just the idea of just getting out of our own heads as well, because I think we can put so much pressure on, like, even if we have this like thought that feels really good, but just get caught up in like, but where is it going to lead to, or but how do I start, or if I start and this happens, then what happens? And actually just getting out of our heads, taking some form of action, as you said, if you can make it a part of something that you're doing with someone else, some form of interaction, we're creating that momentum, from that things can grow.
Absolutely. And Rick, go ahead.
Well, sorry to interrupt. Well, but so I'm going to do it again. So I'm just listening here into really what great teachings are coming through you and what a great teacher you are. And I find myself thinking a little bit about what it's like to be you. And then I find myself thinking about the long and terrible history of the suppression of aliveness in women. Get the angry, heartfelt shivers right now as I say it, and it's huge. It's horrible. With that, I mean, it's like I want to give people warnings. Actually, I don't even want to go into some of the bloody details, as you well know, of how women, in touch with the forest and the land and the spirits and the intensities have just been routinely bad things happen to them, to shut them down. And so I just kind of wonder if you have anything in particular to say about ways you've found to live your aliveness, out loud, large and big and loud and free, while taking into account these systems that are oppressive and can be brutal in society, patriarchy and so forth, that just can shut that down, and it can be dangerous sometimes, personally risky. So I think that's important for us actually to name. We're not advising people to do things that would be wonderful but still personally risky in their situations. Got to take that into account and so forth. How have you yourself navigated all this?
Well, I have to be completely honest, and because of the life I've lived, with parents who were not poor, I mean, we're not rich either, but it's just middle class and a comfortable life. And I have to recognize that I'm white and I live in a place where that is the norm. So I personally wouldn't feel comfortable talking about any kinds of ills that I've come across, but I have been very sensitive to women who have, and that's why I created this initiative that I mentioned. I'm very, very aware that even though I haven't experienced it myself, only in very, how shall I put it? superficial terms. When I was a young girl, it was very normal that you'd walk down the street and you'd get catcalls and things, and people, and a little bit worse than that. So there was a little of that going on. You didn't feel entirely safe walking by yourself. That has changed a great deal in Argentina, at least. I was discussing with my daughter, who's 27 now, and she's been a great activist. And so let me put it in two ways, because there's a good part and a bad part. The good part is, because of the feminist activism, it is no longer that way as much. My daughter walks around a lot more, and if somebody were to touch her inappropriately in the bus, like all other women my generation have experienced, she wouldn't stand for it, and nobody would stand for it. It's just one word and the whole bus would be kicking him off the bus. This did not happen in my time, and we didn't feel that we could speak up. So I'll just acknowledge that a part of that is a very universal experience. But, I've never experienced real violence. Now, there's many women who have. I'm trying to help those women. And just to, I want to kind of bring it, I don't know, maybe I'm switching subjects. I don't want to, but there's something else that I wanted to bring in. And I know we're kind of at the cusp of our talk, and I don't want to leave it out because it's so important. So maybe this is the segue. As I was listening to you bring up this very important point, I wanted to address the issue of the feminine, not only women, but the feminine being suppressed from all of us, including men.
Yeah.
And as we bring this energy that has been so long repressed and suppressed and excluded from the table, there's a possibility, just separating the two. So the women's movement is trying to recuperate or recover or reclaim the very concrete and real rights and protection and voices of women, which is one issue. And the other issue, which maybe from a more, emotional, spiritual point of view, is the whole impulse of the feminine, which brings to the table such very precious things that have not had a chance to be expressed socially. And one of those things, that's what I wanted to sort of land this, is the possibility of living with uncertainty, the opportunity of living with uncertainty and pain, and not making that wrong, and not making that less vital, because it's equally vital. And coming back to this view of life that I so celebrated in Campbell, because I feel so aligned to it. If there's a spirituality that let me quote also the Jewish activist. Oh my God, her name escapes me now. Was it Bella Abzug? No, it wasn't her. Anyway, I'll remember it shortly. She said, if your revolution doesn't allow me to dance, I don't want to be any part of it. So there's that part. But also on the other end, if your revolution or your spirituality doesn't allow me to grieve and be with the painful part of life and accept that it's part of it and that it's equally essential, then that I don't want any part of that either, because that's only a half truth. So if we want to embrace life and honor it with its complexity and its paradoxical nature and its spectrum, its full spectrum, then we need to be, and in order to be fully alive, we have to grapple with death. We have to grapple with loss. We have to understand that we will die many times in our lifetimes, all the time. The more alive we are, the more we die to the momentary experiences that will only take place once. That festive occasion yesterday with the things that happened, that's a one-time in a lifetime opportunity. My hugs with my students who are going back to their countries, of course. I don't know. I hope I'll see them again, but I don't know that we'll be hugging again. So that actually brings me to tears, and those are good tears. We need to acknowledge that every moment is a once in a lifetime opportunity. And I think in a way that is the most vital thing we can do. The most vital stance of all is to live with life and death, dancing with both, and being, I don't want to say equally grateful for both, because that's not realistic, but to at least hold them in the same dignity. Because those letting go moments, that after the hug, when the person goes away, those tears and that heartache, that heartbreak even, is a testament to the real love that you share. So that's as vital as vitality gets. So just to bring that in as well.
Bravo. Thank you. What a beautiful way to finish here and continue. This death also, the death of this conversation is also an opening into the living that will come. So thank you so much. Thank you, Rachel, as well.
Thank you. Fabiana, just before we go, where can people go to find out more about you?
Well, to my website, which is my name, which I'll spell because I know it's difficult in English. So it's www.fabiana, Fabiana, thank you for putting it up, and Fondevila is Fondevila, and dash English to see the English contents. Or you can find my book, which is pretty much in all bookstores and Amazon. It's called Where Wonder Lives. Thank you for that. And I have an upcoming one that I'm writing, but will take a little while. And then and you can check out my social media, my Instagram account. I recently started this one in English, so you won't find too much material, but it's growing at a steady pace. So I'd love for you to join me there as well, so I can share my news. And I'd really like to take a moment to thank you both. Rachael, you've been so gracious from the very beginning and explaining things to me, and so joyfully guiding me through this process. Thank you so much, and your insights that you shared as well. And Rick, what can I say? Just bowing to you in gratitude for this beautiful talk. I'm so inspired by your work, and I will continue to be. So thank you and thank you especially for the Global Compassion Coalition. It really is very much what we needed, and it was you that had to spearhead it. So
great.
Amen for that.
Amen, and amen for everyone being here and participating, and creating such a rich conversation, questions from different people, Nairobi, elsewhere, Pablo, and so forth. Just thank you. Really good.
Thank you.
Okay, good. It's a wrap.
Take care.